Good morning and good afternoon,
Bonjour,
everyone.
bon après-midi à tout le monde.
We'll just give it a few minutes to allow everyone to join us.
Nous allons attendre quelques instants pour permettre aux participants
Je
de...
t'entends sur Zoom.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the 2021 Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub Entrepreneurs Annual Conference, presented in partnership with the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada. Today, our session will be See It, Be It, Crushing Entrepreneurial Stereotypes. My name is Ashley Richard, and I'm the Indigenous Outreach and Partnership Development Lead at the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'll introduce you to our first speaker shortly. For anyone wishing to listen to a live French translation, please select the interpretation button at the bottom right of your screen and choose the French translation option. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you all today from Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. Our regional hubs and partners across Canada similarly gather on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. Let's take a moment to recognize the many traditional lands on which we are connecting and acknowledge with gratitude and respect the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps were first to mark these lands. The Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, or WEKH as we call it, works across the country through 10 regional hubs in English and French to share research on and resources for women entrepreneurs in Canada. Drawing on the expertise of a network that includes more than 250 organizations, we also host and support programming that highlights opportunities and best practices for women entrepreneurs and the organizations that support them, such as this Women's Entrepreneurship Conference. In recognition of International Women's Day and their global theme, Choose to Challenge, WEKH is leading the conversation by challenging stereotypes in entrepreneurship and empowering women to crush barriers. Entrepreneurial stereotypes shape the design of funding programs, incubators and training, and influence financing decisions. Perhaps more importantly, they shape the aspirations and confidence of women. Today, our discussion will focus on the gendered and culturally specific assumptions about entrepreneurship and the challenges they present to women. We also know that women need to see successful entrepreneurs so they can dare to become one, which is why we're excited to unveil today WEKH's new See It, Be It database of 1,000 plus award-winning Canadian women entrepreneurs who are crushing stereotypes. I'm sure you're all looking forward to a very inspiring discussion. We'll begin with a fascinating presentation about entrepreneurial stereotypes and how they shape women's experiences of entrepreneurship from Dr. Suzanne Gagnon, Canada Life Chair in Leadership Education, Associate Professor of Leadership and Organization, and Director of the James W. Burns Leadership Institute at the University of Manitoba's Asper School of Business. This will be followed by an inspiring panel featuring a few leading women entrepreneurs featured in WEKH See It, Be It database, which just launched today. Be sure to place all of your questions in the Q&A box as we look forward to answering them after the discussion. Let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Suzanne Gagnon.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I have the pleasure of working with Ashley quite closely in our WEKH work, which I always very much appreciate. So it's my pleasure today to really be here to help officially launch the WEKH See It, Be It campaign, and to share this session with the CEO of the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada, Allison Kirkland, and with 4 amazing entrepreneurs who are role models in their fields and for all young women. These women are really changing the norm of what it is to be an entrepreneur. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, to present some of the research and how we can understand why it's really important to have campaigns like See It, Be It. So what I do is I'm going to put entrepreneurship in context, in our cultural context. I'm going to talk about stereotypes and why they matter. And I'm going to tell you about our recommendations and steps forward. And in particular, it will be my great pleasure to show you live the See It, Be It database before I turn it over to Allison and our entrepreneurs. So we talk about the framework conditions that support or indeed impede entrepreneurship. And culture is one of these. So culture, along with government policies, financial markets, and infrastructure, have an impact on who can succeed in entrepreneurship. Culture refers to the values and assumptions that shape and reflect human behavior. It emerges from many different factors: the historical context, our institutions, our politics, economics, and it creates cultural and symbolic capital for people. This in turn shapes legitimacy, it shapes people's access to capital, and it shapes customers. So what are stereotypes and why do they matter? At WEKH, we've been looking at this question over the last year and really doing a deep dive into the research on this to work hard on how we can counter the negative stereotypes that may impede women from choosing entrepreneurship or from succeeding once they have chosen. So stereotypes are assumptions that associate certain characteristics with groups of people. They can be positive or negative, and they're often deeply embedded in our culture. So stereotypes and the related assumptions shape every level of what we call the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So some of you will have seen this graphic before. This shows how we at WEKH have come to understand that change is required at all 3 levels of our ecosystem in order to improve the chances of women entrepreneurs and their success. So at the societal level, stereotypes affect how people are represented in the media, how policies are framed, and how infrastructure is developed. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those things. At the organizational level, stereotypes affect strategies and programs, and these are often reinforced in the organizational culture. So if we think about the culture of venture organizations or of some finance institutions, there are some issues there. At the individual level, stereotypes shape individual beliefs, choices, and behavior. So they're very important. The problem with stereotypes is they have the potential to create prejudice. So prejudice exists when people hold a stereotype about a social group that is incongruent with the attributes that are thought to be required for success. So that's, and if we think a little bit further about gendered and cultural stereotypes around entrepreneurship, so what we found is that just as there have tended to be certain cultural and gendered assumptions about leadership in our society that are thankfully changing, there are similar kinds of stereotypes and assumptions around entrepreneurship. And thankfully, those are changing too, thanks to many people here in this call today. However, they remain important and they remain a critical focus for our attention because they tend to disadvantage women. So men are considered to be agentic and are assumed to exhibit stereotypically masculine behaviors such as assertiveness, independence, aggressiveness, and confidence. And women are considered to be communal, to embody stereotypically more feminine behaviors such as empathy, kindness, sensitivity, and concern for others. So these tend to put people into boxes that may or may not be generally true or individually true. So nonetheless, there are social constructs that still exist in our media and elsewhere that associate women strongly with household and familial roles, that consider men the standard or the norm when we talk about entrepreneurship. And these are often reinforced in media representations, which is, as I've said, a very important carrier of culture. So the state of women entrepreneurship, last summer, we published a report, which was the first of its kind with all of our partners and our hubs around the country, that really tried to take stock of where are we in terms of women and entrepreneurship. And what we found that when we talk about owners of SMEs, 15.6% of all small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada are owned by women. When we talk about self-employment, 37.4% of self-employed Canadians are women. When we use a very traditional definition of entrepreneurship as a recent startup, we have 13.3% women. The good news is that women are a larger percentage of new businesses, although their companies tend to be smaller. 92.7% are micro firms with less than 20 employees. And 78.4% of self-employed women have no paid help, which is significantly lower than for men. So what is the importance of these statistics? They're very important in the sense that how we define entrepreneurship itself tends to include and exclude certain people and categories of people. And if we began to include at a policy level self-employment as a definition of entrepreneurship, we would instantly be able to recognize and see the many exciting things that women are doing, along with those who have started their own businesses and who are owners of SMEs. So think entrepreneur, think male. There's a strong stream of research in my field, leadership, around a concept that we've called think leadership, think leader, think male, think leader, think male. And this has been robust, and even recent research underlines that many times when people think of the word leader, a male comes into their minds. So what the media does around these things is super important. And we did a really brief search to test our assumptions about how are entrepreneurs portrayed in the media. We did a search on the internet of entrepreneur person, and this is what we got. This is what we came up with. Many, many males. There are a few women, many, many white males. So such depictions do create and perpetuate stereotypes or norms of who can be an entrepreneur. And that's what we're working against. So the role of the media is super important. We followed up our earlier work with a study of the Globe and Mail and the National Post, Canada's two national newspapers, as well as La Presse in Quebec. And we're we found that, many of these stereotypes or assumptions about gender roles and who can be a successful entrepreneur, in fact, continue to exist in our media stories. Although we did find in the recent year, the last year, this is starting to change, and we're seeing more and more visual depictions of women in the media, as well as more depictions of women in tech, of women in other sectors, in creative industries. So that's good news, but we still have a hill to climb in terms of how women entrepreneurs are represented, and indeed how entrepreneurship in general is represented. There is still a significant overrepresentation of men, of white men, and of men in tech. Men who created, who follow the stereotype of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, not to take anything away from them. So media representation of entrepreneurship matters. It shapes and strengthens women's entrepreneurial assumptions. It influences expectations and perceptions about who can be an entrepreneur, including among financiers, clients, suppliers, and business partners. And there's quite a big body of research that shows this to be the case. So I'm going to talk about 3 impacts. Impacts on program design. So how are we designing our programs to support entrepreneurs? In Canada, the development, innovation, and skills strategies still tend to be saturated with language that privileges science, tech, and engineering. And of course, we have powerful women working in those fields, but we also have powerful women working in many, many other fields in terms of their entrepreneurial activities. So while the overarching goals may be more general, the focus in this programming tends to reinforce the disruptive technologies, even though we know that the adoption of technology rather than the creation of technology is what drives innovation. Now, the impacts of stereotyping on financing are also very important. So around the world, women are thought to be risk averse and to fear failure. These are tropes that come forward in many stories in the media in ways that are not representative of reality and tend to create around women what we call a deficit discourse. So it's about what women lack instead of about what they are awesome at. So these stereotypes become barriers when women entrepreneurs seek financing, because women don't always fit the stereotype of what a successful entrepreneur looks like. They're actually less likely to receive financing, including from angel investors. So I've got some information here, and I think these slides will be available that outline some of the details of these studies, but they're really quite striking. So this remains a problem, especially around venture capital. So stereotype threat is an issue that is also created and reinforced by some of these dynamics. So women and other underrepresented groups may internalize negative stereotypes, which in turn shapes their behavior. So when we talk about women and borrowing, they're considered to be discouraged borrowers. So this means that they need finance, but they may not apply because they fear denial. So this is a manifestation of stereotype threat. Women experience bias, internalize it, they expect to be stereotyped, and that may well prevent them from pursuing opportunities in activities dominated by men. So similar phenomena have also been observed and researched among Black entrepreneurs. There's also an impact of stereotyping on business support. So we talk about incubators and accelerators. These tend to support white male technology entrepreneurs. Many people around this country and connected to WEKH and to WEOC are working hard to change this picture right now. But the fact remains that women only have a 5 to 10% share of accelerator programs, and that's North America-wide statistics. So impacts of stereotyping around on women themselves, so on individual behavior. We know that women have often lacked the same networks that men have had. And stereotypes matter in entrepreneurship because they impact women in multiple ways. They may push women away from some entrepreneurial activities because they don't see themselves in the success stories. They may affect sense of self-efficacy and high growth intention of some entrepreneurs. They do, research shows this to be the case. They affect women's self-confidence to start a business, and there's always a risk of stereotype threat. So this is reinforced by this perceived mismatch between woman and entrepreneur. But we're going to change all that. We are changing all that, as are you. So navigating gender and entrepreneur roles becomes a task that women and people of other minority groups, and it's very important here to also state that women of color and Indigenous women may have reinforcing impacts of these kinds of issues and barriers. So, and WEKH is also studying that. So I've got a couple of slides here also about technology. And it's important when we talk about shifting stereotypes, not only to ensure that the women who are leading in technology, some of who will be on your panel today, get the same attention as those men in the media and can be role models for young women, but also that we recognize that there's many other aspects of entrepreneurship that don't get the same attention, that tend to be dominated by women. So we have several recommendations and steps forward. At the societal level, we need to challenge stereotypes of entrepreneurship in the media, in programming, including in post-secondary, and in policies. We should celebrate women's success and promote successful women entrepreneurs as role models. At the organizational level, so focusing on the tone at the top is very, very important. So the explicit business case for inclusion in incubators and venture capital and similar contexts, the fact that we're very artificially reducing the pool of talent by not ensuring that women and are fully included at the organizational level. So prioritize benchmarking and target setting, leverage the value chain, and build the pipeline. So build support for upcoming women, which many of you work on. At the individual level, entrepreneurship should be promoted to women as a career option. Gender-specific SME training and development support services should be provided in greater measure than now. Biases and privilege, stereotypes and microaggressions should continue to be challenged. So we talk about building the incubation and acceleration pathways from ideation through. We need attention to all of these points in the pathway for women and diverse women. And now it's my huge pleasure to show you some of the amazing women that are included in our See It, Be It campaign. So the very strong research-based impetus and principle behind this campaign is that if you can see it, you can be it. And we're launching a database of 1,000 award-winning and recognized entrepreneurs today in celebration of International Women's Day and in celebration of all our women entrepreneurs in Canada from different regions, from different races, from different backgrounds, from different communities, and working in different sectors. And here are just a few of those. So we're very excited to share this with you. And I would just like to introduce our moderator for the next section and tell you who our 4 wonderful entrepreneurs are who are going to speak to you today about their experiences and their journey how they've battled stereotypes, and how they are indeed role models for many women. But we would like to show you this, and as soon as I've done that, we're going to briefly show you this database and show you how exciting. Oh, here it is now. Okay, so we'll show you the database right now. This is what it looks like. There are 1,000 women in this database, and we hope that it will be an important resource and data source for policymakers, for educators, for all of the organizations all around the country who work every day to support women entrepreneurs, and for young women, young diverse women to see and be shown the role models that they can follow. So we're super excited about this. So thank you so much. And I would like to now introduce Allison Kirkland and our 4 panelists. So Allison Kirkland is the Chief Executive Officer of the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada. And she's also based here in Winnipeg. And I always say that because we're in the same city, and we'd like to put a plug in for our city at the heart of some of these efforts. And Allison has really worked for much of her career, maybe perhaps all of her career, supporting individual women to proceed with confidence in their entrepreneurial ventures and initiatives. So we're very pleased to have Allison moderate this panel next. And the panelists who will introduce themselves in more detail and tell you about their exciting companies are Emma Todd, who's the Managing Director of the MMH Group and a leader in blockchain technology. Welcome to Emma. We have Humaira Ahmed, who's the founder and CEO of Locelle. We have Tanis George, who is the co-founder of Trulioo. Really look forward to hearing more from you, Tanis. And we have Madame Anne Martel, who is the co-founder of Element AI, artificial intelligence. And this is not her first entrepreneurial venture either. So each of them will tell you more about their stories. And I'm turning it over now to Allison to please moderate that panel. Thank you very much for your attention and time. All the best.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. That was a great session, and it provided such a great foundation for the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. So as Suzanne mentioned, I'm with the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada, and we're delighted to be partnering with the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub as a presenting partner on this series of sessions. I always joke that the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada doesn't actually work with women entrepreneurs. We support the organizations that work directly with women entrepreneurs, and our goal is to provide tools and resources and to connect the ecosystem so that every woman across Canada has access to all the amazing tools and knowledge and expertise that exists in this country to support women entrepreneurs. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to be surrounded by this brilliant panel. In fact, I'm quite intimidated by all of their accomplishments. And so you have not signed on to this to hear from me, you have signed on to hear from them. And so I am going to ask each of them, and I'll sort of turn it over to them individually, but I'm going to ask each of them to just give us a little bit of background on them and their business, and then we'll dive into deeper questions regarding their journeys. But first off, if you could, I'll start with Emma, and if you could just give us a sort of the Coles Notes version of who you are and your business, that would be awesome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. And Suzanne, that was an amazing report, so thank you. And, just like entrepreneurship, you kind of deal with things, and there's a plane flying overhead as I am talking to you guys. Okay, now it's gone. Anyway, welcome. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Emma. I am the CEO of MMH Group. I'm an entrepreneur, as you guys may have guessed. I've been in the business for 15 years. My company deals with blockchain. So we do consulting, we do crypto mining, we provide communications, and we provide events for technology companies, primarily blockchain. I am also the chair-elect for Girls in Tech. I am the co-chair for the FinTech Committee for the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, which is Canada's largest blockchain association. I'm the past chair for the Blockchain for Impact, which deals with the United Nations. Previous to this, I was in banking for 15 years, and I worked at some of the largest banks in North America. I worked at Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, RBC here in Canada, as well as CIBC and a few others. And I am so thrilled to be here. And I want to thank you guys for having me.
Thanks so much, Emma. That's a great start. And we're going to dig into some of that in a little bit. I'm going to turn it over now to Humaira. Welcome, Humaira. And if you could give us just a bit of background, that would be awesome. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Allison. And thank you, Wendy, for sponsoring me to do this today. So I'm Humaira Ahmed. I'm the founder and CEO of Locelle, which is a career development platform dedicated to women in the workplace. Our mission is to create equitable workplaces for women. And we do that through one-to-one tailored mentorship from other women leaders. Yeah, I was actually born and raised in Pakistan. My family moved in 2005. So yeah, quite a journey to move to Canada and learn about the culture. But also one thing that I'm deeply passionate about is in Pakistan, I was doing software engineering and we were 40% to 60% women in engineering and other STEM fields as well. And when I moved to Toronto at York University, I was either one of the only women in class of 160 or one of the few, as I was in third year because my credits were transferred. And that was the first time I really felt a disconnect. And from there, I mean, I have 2 daughters now, and it is really a mission of mine to create those equitable workplaces. So this here, what you're doing, see it, be it, is extremely important. Yeah, really honored to be here.
Thanks, Humaira. Tanis, how about over to you?
Hi, Allison. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on. So I am the co-founder of Trulioo Inc., which is a global identity verification company, which was founded almost just shy of 10 years ago. And my career started actually right outside of high school. I started my first business a couple of years just outside of high school. Tech company, also in the identity space, and founded it with my co-founder, who ended up being my co-founder in all subsequent 4 businesses that we did over the course of 20 years. And so no history in tech, but we found a problem in the marketplace and we filled it. And over the course of 10 years, we managed to successfully build and exit three tech companies. And then in the early 2010s, we started Trulioo. And it was an exciting journey, still is an exciting journey to see the company grow the way it has. And yeah, I just have a passion for entrepreneurship. I think it's the foundation of our economy. And I think it's extremely important to lift up entrepreneurs. I think they're vital to our society. And I'm really excited to be able to kind of grow and help people expand their businesses.
Thanks, Tanis. It's interesting what you said just about spotting an opportunity in the marketplace. It wasn't that you had this great product and then you were trying to sell it, but that you found something. And I think that in the work that I've done over the years and the women entrepreneurs I've worked with or been in touch with, it's seeing the gap. It's not necessarily just finding a product and hoping, or having a product and hoping somebody will buy it. So I think that that's a really interesting insight. I'm going to turn it over to Anne, and for the final introduction, and looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Tanis, I loved your story because I very much relate to not having a tech background and still making the plunge in tech. So that's always very refreshing to exchange notes on that. So I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I have 2 exits. I started my career actually in the medical sector. So I had a medical devices distribution and a manufacturing plant. So very kind of male dominated traditional type of environment. And I sold that in 2014, where I was really starting to see the rise, especially in Montreal, of artificial intelligence. And given the network and the connections that I have in the field, it quickly became clear that, you know, my next business would have to be in tech and would have to be in AI. So I read every book that I could to try to catch up with, you know, everything that I needed to learn, and launched Element AI in 2016, which we just recently sold to ServiceNow. So currently I'm working on my next company, because being a serialer, that's what you do. So so yeah, I'll have more on that in a couple of months, hoping to get funded and, you know, get another one going.
That's great, and I think I'm going to sort of tap into this, and our first question for everybody is just to talk a little bit about your journey. And so we've covered some of this, but I know, Anne, when we were speaking in sort of our prep discussion earlier this week, you mentioned that you come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so maybe you could incorporate some of that into the discussion, and just talking about what foundation that provided, and your thoughts on whether that was super important in the success that you've had to date, or, you know, you don't need necessarily an entrepreneurial family to succeed. So
I don't think necessarily you do. And actually, it's funny because for me, it kind of had the reverse effect, in the sense that my father was an entrepreneur, and it seemed like an acceptable, you know, job for a man, but not so much for a woman. So I think that for a long time, maybe not so much anymore, but for a long time, he was quite disappointed that I decided to go down that route. I think the path of, you know, being a lawyer or a doctor, or, you know, something with a bit more security and stability, was really something he was, for whatever reason, hoping I would choose. And I had to battle that for quite some time, until I just found myself and decided that, you know, I'm also allowed to kind of take a plunge and take risk, and decided to do it anyways. And I think that now everyone's happy that I've made that decision, but at the time it was not necessarily the case.
that's an interesting comment, because Emma, you mentioned that a little bit when we were speaking earlier this week, that your family sort of questioned your jump into entrepreneurship when you decided to step away from the corporate world and do this.
Yes,
can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's not so much, I don't think it was an entrepreneurship, it was blockchain that they'd never heard of, or Bitcoin, and they thought I was crazy, and they were extremely concerned that I was leaving my nice, you know, banking life to go and pursue this role that no one had heard of anywhere. And I was like, no, it's guys, it's going to be a big thing, trust me. And they were like, no, we don't know anything about this. And they were really, really worried. Like, I remember I went to a wedding in Atlanta, and my family met me like outside, and they were like, can we talk about this job that, you know, you like, what you want to do? So it was kind of interesting. But, you know, I was crazy in 2016. At the end of 2017, I was a visionary, because people started to learn a little bit more about Bitcoin and blockchain. And when I had first told them about Bitcoin, it was at $400. And at the end of 2017, it was 19,000. And everybody was talking about it. So suddenly it was like, wow, you know? And that's when they stopped thinking I was crazy. So it did make for interesting family holidays, I will tell you that.
And they all wish they'd invested when you did. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, I've learned that you can't, people are who they are, because they knew it in 19,000 and they still didn't invest. And we had a family Zoom call last week when it was at 57,000. They still hadn't invested then, right? So like, if you're going to, you're going to. If you're not, you're not, right? So, but they all said, it was kind of funny. They were like, Emma was right. Emma was right. So I'm like, the story still isn't over yet, people, but you know, you could have made some good money. I'm just saying.
Exactly. Tanis, you mentioned that you were a serial entrepreneur, and can you talk a little bit about that journey? And you said, you know, right out of high school. So was this always in the back of your mind, or?
Yeah, so just like Anne, actually, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. But I had a little bit of a different experience with my father. My father actually constantly talked to me about, you know, anything that I wanted to do that I could do, in the sense, he actually had a business that was a door-to-door vacuum cleaner sales back in the 70s. He was extremely successful at it. But he would train his guys in the mornings, his sales team with records, and self-help guys they'd do all this stuff. So my dad was very much about playing the numbers. And so as I grew up, I always had a support from him, sort of telling me, look, whatever you want to do, you can do, just play the numbers, just work the hardest, get through it all, and you can do that. So it was always in the back of my mind. I was the first person in my family to actually graduate high school. Everyone was entrepreneurs, my siblings, everybody just became entrepreneurs. So I never actually intended to go on into other school, but yet I didn't know what kind of business. So when my co-founder reached out to me a couple of years out of high school and said, I have this business idea, that's what got me excited. So I just really fell into it. And yeah, but definitely, I think just having everyone around me being entrepreneurs, and fortunately successful entrepreneurs. So to me, that was the lifestyle that I wanted. And it just was waiting on the moment when I found the right product or service.
That's awesome. And there's so many nuggets that are coming out of this conversation that I could revisit. So we might be here all afternoon. So I hope you don't mind. And I just also want to remind anybody who's with us to send in your questions, because we're going to take those as well. And I know that there's lots of things that as they occur to me, I'm sure they're occurring to you. I'm going to turn it over to Humaira. You know, you came to Canada, you said, was it in your third year of university? Were you? And so it was a culture shock, and now you're in business, you've got little girls, you've got children. So tell us about that journey and how that unfolded.
Yeah, so mine's probably very different. So I grew up in Pakistan, and it was always, you're going to be a housewife. So they train you to be a good housewife. You cook, again, very stereotypical. You're going to cook, you're going to maybe not clean, because we have luxury of having help, but still know how to work them. And that was my life. Like, they were also going to decide who I was going to marry. So I actually, very quickly, I was engaged to be married at 15 and 17 to men I didn't even know. I hadn't even seen them. So that's kind of my background and upbringing. And I knew my dad is an MBA, and he was very focused on education. And it was either I was going to convince my dad through education or my passion for it that, you know, this is my path and not marriage, and especially that early. And yeah, so that was my way of kind of, you know, fighting the system. And yeah, I mean, that's a separate story. Probably it will take an afternoon, but I got out of those two. Didn't get married, but I had to work really hard to get into the best school, because that is subsidized, and you know, it's easier for parents to support you with that. So I got into software engineering because I was good at math. So that was kind of my out of the system. So I didn't really have role models. I mean, my mom never worked. She was married out of, you know, high school. She was 17. And so that was, and exactly the role models we had everywhere were like my mother. And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be like my dad, because I noticed my dad would come home and everybody was like, oh, dad's home. I was like, I want that. I want to be like, I want to come home and everybody's like, food's ready, everybody's happy. And so that was interesting. And then we moved. My family decided to move in 2005. And so coming from software engineering, you know, it's what got me through all of the adversity. And I thought that's, you know, that was my path, but just not seeing enough women. And perhaps it was that it was third year. This is 14 years ago. So third year, maybe women have dropped out by then. I didn't know anything. So there was cultural shock. There was all sorts of shocks. But also just, so I actually did not finish it. So I continued the dance for 8 months, and I was like, where are all these women? Like, where do I see women? It was communications. So that was another uphill battle, because I didn't know how to present, how to write, how to speak. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge. But over the years, I ended up working in the tech industry in marketing communications role. And I actually learned I wasn't a very good employee. So for those women who think they will probably not be a good employee or something's wrong, maybe you're supposed to be an entrepreneur, because I want to get stuff done. It doesn't always work, when you are working for someone. So that was kind of, so I had my marketing company for about 8 years, and I would just, pick and choose clients that I wanted to work with. And so that worked great until I had my 2 daughters. So when I had my 2 daughters, I would look around and disconnect you see in the society. I mean, I would talk about, computer science and stuff. The friends that I was starting to make, they were like, oh, Miss Business, Miss Tech. And it was just a shocker. And I live in Victoria, in case you're wondering. And so it was just that I want my girls to, grow up to be in positions or roles where they can make money, where they can make decisions and not rely on others. So that is where, there's a lot of history there of why I do what I do. And for the longest time, because my product is for women, there's a lot of challenges there too, because, a lot of people were like, oh, you should do a not-for-profit. You're not going to make money out of this. Well, guess what? We're actually on our path to profitability in the next few months. So all bootstrap, right? So there's a lot of kind of history, cultural stereotypes that I've had to navigate. And I do this so that my girls and future generation don't necessarily have to.
Right. Very, very interesting, very timely, especially being a mother of little girls, right? And you want to carve out a path that
exactly
will be easier for them. I'm going to come back to Anne rather, and Tanis. Just with regard, you both mentioned fathers who were entrepreneurial, and so sort of looking to them. And so maybe Anne, start with you. Were there others that you were looking to, or were most of your role models male, and who else influenced you in your journey?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I was really striving to find women role models. So I kind of pieced up many different women qualities into what my role model was. So they could come from fiction. I lived, in my imaginary world for far too long. I'm probably still a little bit in it at times, but I think there was a bit of that, and also just stories about my ancestors, stories about people that had, inherent qualities that I respected. So one story I found fascinating was about my great grandmother, whom I've never met, but she was an incredible source of inspiration because she came from rural Quebec. She had, 8 kids, as you did, back in the days. And her husband, my great grandfather, died very young. So she had all these mouths to feed, no education and nothing to support her. So she turned to the only thing that she could do, which was butter. So she started churning butter and making flavored butter that she would sell to everyone in her village to be able to support herself. And that was so magical for me, just like the resilience to get through, an experience like that, and the willpower it takes to kind of find something you can do to just support your family, but also the kind of ingenuity of not just making a basic product, but also kind of customizing it to your customer's need, essentially. I thought that was such a beautiful story. So it's little things like that I pieced up together to kind of, be inspired. But I didn't have like one specific person to look up to besides my parents. Yeah.
Right. That is an amazing story. And it's funny how things sort of come from generation to generation. And it's not always a direct line to, from this to that. It's a bit of a curving path. Tanis, who else influenced you?
Yeah. So interestingly, as you say that, in the businesses, so my dad, I should be extra clear that it was actually my dad and my mom together who ran the business. So they were both very involved. When I was in high school at 15, I met my soon to become my husband, and his family were entrepreneurs as well. And his parents both worked together in their business as well. So as I reflect back, I think that was also just another thing, that the expectation was that that women were involved in business as well. They worked alongside. I don't know if that ended up subconsciously coming with my co-founder being a guy as well. So we were mixed founders in our businesses as well. But yeah, ultimately, I think I did have those additional women who were involved in business as well, and took part in the growth of the business alongside their partners. So I did have that access as well.
Interesting that both your parents and your in-laws, and now you and your husband, are couples, and you've seen it working, because some people say there's no way I would work with my spouse, right? It's just not.
Well, I should be clear. My co-founder in all my businesses was a friend. It wasn't my husband.
Oh, okay.
I could not work with my husband. So that adage is true. No, my co-founder, he was my best friend in high school. And so he and I went on to build businesses together, but yeah, not with my husband.
Great, good to know. Yeah. Oh, Emma, how about you? I mean, who influenced you along the way, and what made you take the leap?
So I'm maybe a little bit different. I never actually had role models. I just sort of went out and did things. I was like, I want to do this, and I just did it. And honestly, it wasn't until COVID when I sat back and I looked and I was like, I've done all this, because when you're an entrepreneur, you just sort of do it, right? And then you just keep going, and you don't take any time to kind of stop and smell the roses, because you're always in go mode. And then I kind of looked back and I was like, a year ago, like I was at the UN, I was speaking, and I totally didn't take the time to enjoy it. I was just like, okay, that's done. Okay, we got to go back to Toronto. We got things to do, and now I kind of wish I'd taken the time to stop and smell the roses. And I sort of made that commitment to myself to do that once we get out of quarantine. Once we get out of COVID, I'm going to stop and smell the roses. I'm still not doing it now. I'm still in go mode, yeah, I just kind of decided I want to do blockchain. My friend had a party, and I said to her, I want to do fintech. And she said, well, what about blockchain? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, what about Bitcoin? I'm like, say what? So I then went and researched it, and then I went to a conference, long story about that one. And I ended up interacting with all these amazing people. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. And, looking back, I just went out and did it. And I would encourage anybody who, if you want to do something, don't let anything stop you. So there's a really great picture. I guess I should have had it somewhere with me where I could show you guys. I was going to meetups in Toronto at Mars. So you guys have been to Mars. It's a beautiful building, college in Queen, I think. And, they've got this gorgeous auditorium. And we used to have meetups there because people were just getting, like the underground, people were just getting really interested in blockchain. And people started flying in from all over the world, to the point where the fire marshal was like, maybe you guys should go somewhere else. So we started going to the Sheraton. But in the early days, you look around that room and there'd be 500 people there. There'd be 495 men, and I would be the only Black person in the room. And there'd be 5 women, and we're all still really good friends. And we've all kind of gone on to do like absolutely, they're really, really impressive. But they were my sounding board whenever I had any things that I wanted to, really kind of question or say, how should I do this, or things like that. And that's what I would tell you. If you really want to do something, you just kind of go out there and do it. And you don't worry that you might be the only one or the only woman or anything like that. Don't let anyone stop you, because I would really hate to look back on my life and think, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. I'd rather try it and succeed or not succeed. But if I don't succeed, at least I've learned for the next time. So that's what I encourage everybody. If you really want to do something, don't let anyone stop you. If they tell you no, do it anyway, unless it's illegal.
Even then, you never know. Where do you think that came from? was that, you know, from your mom or from someone else in your family, or do you think it's just, you just have that in you? Like,
And you know, when I talk to my family, we all trace it back to my grandmother. My grandmother was absolutely amazing. And when I look back, I just don't know how she did everything that she did in that day and age. You know, she had a lot of kids and they all kind of went on to do all these amazing things. So my dad's an engineer, my aunt's a doctor, my uncle's an accountant, my other uncle runs a construction firm, my aunt's in banking, and them achieving all those goals sort of allowed their kids to sort of kind of go out and do whatever they want to, and there wasn't necessarily that pressure. I mean, yeah, you had to go to school. There was no, you're not going to school, but it's sort of just, you know, and just me thinking how they were able to do that, you know, in like the 60s and 70s and things like that. And I'm always still finding out really impressive things about my family. Like I just found out, I kid you not, guys, I found this out in October that my grandfather, when my grandfather was an engineer and went to school in England in World War II. What? Like, don't you think this is something you should have told me years ago? And it was just like I said, Dad, you know, Grandpa was an engineer. Was he really an engineer? And he's like, yeah, he went to school. I'm like, where? And he was like, the school you're doing your MBA at now. And I'm like, don't you think you should have told me that? And yeah, he's like, oh, sorry. So they just sort of take, they sort of take, you know, schooling and like doing that stuff like as the norm for them. So maybe that's where we got it from.
Yeah, so that brings us back a little bit, more than a little bit, to just the whole theme of today, which is role models, right? And they can be anyone, but how important they are to provide the opportunity for you to see that things are achievable and that, you know, that there is a path. I'm going to come to you, Anne, and I was, you know, doing my homework and I've got all these notes in front of me, and you've got quite a team of co-founders that you started Element AI with, and they're all male. And you know, what was that like, and what role as a woman did you bring to that? And yeah, if you could just expand on that a little bit, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because they're also all serial entrepreneurs, and you know, diversity was certainly something that was very present in their previous companies. So they always made me feel not only part of the group, I never felt excluded. We had a very good dynamic, but also I think that they would lean in on, you know, what I would say a lot more and make sure to really integrate my feedback. So it was a great experience. I would have loved to have, you know, more women as part of the founding team, but at the end of the day, like, it's a founding team. So it's you and, you know, the other founders. You don't necessarily have much control over that, right? But no, it was a really great experience with amazing people.
That's great. Tanis, did you experience the same with a sort of a male-dominated? Trulioo is tech. It's, you know, did you have the same experience, or was yours a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, I remember when I was about a year or two into Trulioo, when I got my first request to speak as a woman in tech. And I remember thinking, woman in tech, like what? Explain to me what versus a founder in tech. And that's when I started to see that there was this shift happening with this narrative a bit more of about being a woman in tech, and sort of highlighting the female side of being a founder. And I have to say, it wasn't something that affected my journey very much upon reflection. It wasn't, I think we were just so focused on putting out fires and in our businesses that, you know, the strategy was always very much focused on building a bigger and better product, and trying to do, I think, just our focus was always on more so the numbers than I don't think it ever dawned on me to think about it as a gender related type issues. So, you know, for us, it was always kind of head down and focus on that. So I didn't have, you know, it wasn't something that I saw a major challenge for in our business as we were growing it.
If I can build on that a little bit, Allison, like I still feel very strange about the whole women in tech thing. I still feel very awkward, and I tend to shy away from like those speaking engagements because it just makes me feel uncomfortable. I like to showcase the engineers and, you know, in forums like that. So I would always, I received a number of invitations over the years for, you know, speaking events like that. And I would always promote like, yeah, the female leads we had in the technical teams, but I never took it upon myself to be to represent women in tech. I still don't feel very comfortable to do that. I prefer to be a founder. I think that's also a thing, and that's a thing that I relate to.
That's very interesting. Now, just remind me, and Tanis, neither of you sort of are engineers per se, or so there wasn't this great, you know, PhD in some engineering thing, technical. Okay. So that's, you know, so yeah, when you're saying a tech company, it's okay, let's have the technical aspect spoken to rather than the founder aspect. Do you think that is because it's, you know, you're shy and you just want to sort of stay away from the limelight, or you just think that people want to hear more of the technical stuff? And that's what you would bring to the table. They not necessarily want to hear the founder story. They want to hear the technical story.
It's always ambivalent, I think. So because I didn't know, I just decided it wasn't for me. But maybe it very well was. But I just figured that I'm certainly a woman who's built a tech company, but I'm not a person who is technical, and I appreciate that about myself too. Like I think that adds a different perspective in an environment, you know, filled with engineers. So I'm very proud actually to have done that without having that technical background. So I just preferred to not do those things and just be me.
Yeah, I think it was a similar thing for me. I think ultimately, when I was asked to speak as a woman, I found that sometimes when I would come in and say, actually, it was not a reflection of my story, I actually would get a lot of women come up to me saying how grateful they were to hear that if they were to start a business, that it wasn't necessarily guaranteed to be this kind of, you know, male dominated, you're going to get pushed down society. And I think they were encouraged to hear that for somebody, that wasn't even something that felt like an obstacle. And I think that it's really important to bring women to the highlight. And I think it's excellent to see women highlighted and all of that kind of stuff. But the pendulum can swing sometimes so far in our efforts to encourage women and say, don't be afraid of the men, don't be afraid of this thing, that they go, oh my God, I didn't know I had to be, or am I really going to go into this nightmare? And it can almost swing the pendulum a little bit in a way that I think, well, obviously none of us are intending. So I like to kind of come in and say that this was my experience. And I think for some that it becomes, you know, a breath of relief to know that there's a good chance that they're not necessarily always going to be reached with these obstacles. So that's why I like to just talk foundership.
And to build on that, just a couple of things. So I, in the beginning, I used to feel the way that Anne did. You know, I want you to talk about the things I've done, you know, the projects I've helped on, like, you know, the really great things that we're doing, just focus on the fact that I'm a woman, you know. But then I realized that, you know, I was standing a few things. Blockchain inherently, it's predominantly men. It's gotten better over the years, but it's still like when whenever I would go anywhere, I remember going to Malta and I walked into the auditorium and it was 8,000 people and I was one of 20 women, 20. But and I headed for the stage and the guy said to me later, when I saw you walk in, I knew that you were going to be on stage. He goes, it just absolutely made sense. But people would then tell me, thank you, you know, they would watch what I was doing on LinkedIn and they would say, thank you, because I've been wondering. And you know, I kind of wanted to take the leap. And then I realized, even though this is just me sort of going out and doing things, some people do need that encouragement or that bit of inspiration to sort of go and do things. And then last year, I heard some stats that were quite frankly alarming, which is what made me kind of get into girls in tech. And I am where I am now. I was speaking at Parliament, and we're doing a panel on women in tech. And it turns out that when women go to, and Humaira, this is going to probably sound a little familiar to you, although you got there in third year, when women go do tech in university, they basically start out a little bit higher than guys in terms of percentage of women getting into computer science and things like that, but they drop out at the end of year one simply because of the resistance that they perceive or the way that they feel. And then what happens then, and then it kind of continues in year two and year three. When they graduate, they don't necessarily, and if they do happen to graduate and they make it to a tech firm, they tend to like leave within the first year because they don't have the things that women want, which is like a little bit more flexibility or things like that. What we found is that it's not they're leaving tech entirely, they're just going to work for a company that gives them more of the flexibility that they want. So when I found that out, I was a little bit kind of like heartbroken, simply because I am like, never let anyone define who you are. If you want to do something, just do it. And then to hear that these women felt so uncomfortable in class that they just didn't go back for year two or they dropped out, you know, I was like, we need to show them that there's life beyond that. If you just keep pushing and keep persevering, you can achieve what you want and still be who you are. And that's what made me be that way, like, you know, start working with girls in tech and things like that. And that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thanks, Emma. And I'm going to turn it over to Humaira here just to comment on that, because you experienced some of that, I'm sure, just given the proportion of women to men in your class. What was you thinking? Was there support among the women? Was there sort of a, you know, helping each other? Because so often we hear that, you know, it's the women who stick together and that, you know, are the supportive. And how did you find that experience?
Yeah, I mean, in school, in Pakistan, it was very, you know, we still stuck together. We were, you know, women with women, and it was also the culture. But in Canada, I mean, it was so new. Everything was so new that I was so scared to even ask, you know, people questions. I mean, again, you're coming from third world country. So you're already thinking you're beneath everybody. And so with that experience, I didn't have, you know, the confidence to go and ask, or even the few women that I would see to just form their, you know, group. It was just hard. And I think it still stands today. Like, it's hard to break into an already formed group. So that was that aside, but I think just in tech. So Anne and Tanis is so, I mean, it's such a different experience I'm hearing. And I think we need to see that, because, you know, when I decided to start a tech company, which was very different from a marketing company, which is very stereotypical, women do a lot of marketing and it's acceptable. But in the tech, the challenges have been insane. So I want to sign up for what you had. You know, and it's good to be able to share, because it became, and I don't know if it's regional, you know, I'm in Vancouver Island, even though we have really supportive tech community, it's just, you have to go beyond the island. So you go to Vancouver, you go to Toronto, you go to Seattle. So I would travel and just share my, you know, idea, whatever that may be. And just the even comments, I mean, the emotional labor. So, you know, my hair was talk of town. And just the comments I would get at conferences. Oh, she cannot be a founder. What are you talking about? Somebody, you know, reference to my colleague, she can't be the founder. She looks like she works in marketing. So and I mean, I did, so can't argue there. But just even the stereotype of like, oh, I saw your hair last night and I knew I had to talk to you. Now I am going as the founder to pitch. We have been selected as one of top 8 companies, SaaS companies at SaaS North. And just even hearing those types of comments from people who don't even know me. Like, I'm running into a meeting, I don't have time for this. So the emotional labor, what am I going to wear that is acceptable? I need to make sure I have my wedding rings on and they fit. You know, if not, I'm going to go buy whatever. What response I'm going to have, you know, for people who say things that are highly inappropriate. What am I going to respond with when people say, oh, who's taking care of your kids? Wow, your kids are so young. well, the parent, right? The other parent. So it's so interesting because for the longest time, even though I worked in the tech industry doing marketing, I never paid attention. I don't think our intentions there, like we're people doing good work, we're smart, and that's why we're here. But I think when you start a tech company, starting with the capital, unless you have extensive network, unless you have all those friends and family, and people just say friends and family around. And I was like, what is that? I mean, in Pakistan, you can't, even if you have money, you're not going to take money because that's a death of relationships. So for me, I was like, I don't have rich family and friends here. Who do I go and ask for money? So then it's like, okay, well, angel investment. Investors will waste your time. A lot of times, and I asked one of my amazing investors, I'm not going to name him, but I asked him, I was like, why do you think that is? Like, I feel like I get so many meetings, but nothing happens. It's like, as an investor, as a male investor, am I going to spend time with a woman like you or a geek whose technology I have no interest in? I have a lot of time to waste. So just even those experiences, and then deciding to bootstrap because you know what, I also have time that I don't want to waste. So there's a lot of barriers that I have faced because the lack of network, lack of role models. So I would actually look up Oprah. I mean, far-fetched, but I would watch her videos because I was like, she built something by herself in a time that, I mean, I can't even imagine. So I would watch her videos. I would, watch Dragon's Den, and I learned about Arlene Dickinson. So I was probably one of the first people to buy her book. I was like, I want to learn, like, did she always have this money? No, she didn't. So I think just even learning people who have been through a lot of adversity, but have come out on the other side, has given me that inspiration and motivation and encouragement to be able to do that. And even today I get asked, okay, well, so profitable bootstrap company, great. Do you want that lifestyle? It's a lifestyle question now. Do you want to enjoy time with your family, or do you want to raise capital and just go all out? Well, I'd rather have you do that. And it's just so much. People judge, people make assumptions, and there are a lot of barriers. I can tell you the emotional labor even today that I have going into a lot of meetings, it's insane. I wish for an equitable workplace, and which is why I think we need, there are barriers, there are challenges, and barriers, whether, it's your race, it's your gender, it's your language. So many women don't start companies because they come to me and they say, how did you learn English? I mean, I learned English. I just had to learn Canadian accent or whatever accent that people can understand. So it's not that I'm a quick learner, which I am, but it's like, I had to do it so I wasn't made fun of. So, I mean, there's a lot here, right? There's a lot of barriers, challenges, lack of access to the right network, right capital. And yeah, so sometimes it's this emotional labor is too much and you just want to do your thing. You know what? I want to do this. I'm going to just do it. So, yeah.
So you and Emma are on the same wavelength, just do it. I'm just going to flip over to some of the questions that have been coming in, and just picking up on something that Humaira said, and it was challenges on getting private investors, sort of failures and success stories. And I think both Anne and Tanis, I know that you did have venture capital, and can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how?
So yeah, I've been very fortunate on the VC front. We raised, I think, over $200 million over two and a half years. So I mean, we've been very successful at fundraising. But I do remember when we were starting and we were at the seed stage, I would talk to VCs, and I had just gotten married. And so the reaction was like, okay, so when are you going to have kids? And I actually had VCs ask me that questions. It just, so we've been fortunate, but there's been hardship as well through the process. And, I have a ton of stories like that, or just even like, I think sometimes VCs don't realize that you're listening to what they have to say. Like you're just, everything that they say is gold because you're trying to improve your business model. You just want to learn. And sometimes they would pass remark, or they would, talk about another founder who's a woman and describe her as emotional. So like that would happen all the time. And it just made me feel so insecure walking in those meetings, like so self-conscious around how am I going to come across? So I have to be extra confident. I have to be, this person that I am sometimes, but not every day. Like I'm a normal human, so I'm just not like stable and the same every single day. And just it was very strange, but you know, over time we did well at it. So I think I got confidence from that success. But no, it was very difficult.
And you do hear the stories of women getting the different questions than men, you know, when they're being talked to by an investor or asked questions. So it's crazy. Tanis, did you have a comparable experience, or, you know, what was it like for you?
Yeah, so we actually went down to the Silicon Valley to try and raise our first initial amount of funding. Our business was already in development, so I stayed up in Vancouver running the office, and Stephen actually went down to the Silicon Valley. We had space in an incubator down there, and so he was down there. And so he would do the initial conversations with VCs. And then when we got a second meeting, I would fly down and we would carry on the conversations. And we had over 100, I think we counted 150 pitches before we got our first investment. It took a long time. And actually the VC that funded us our first time, we met him. He was one of the first 10 that we met with. And a year and a half later, after watching us and seeing our growth, he finally stepped in. So that was our first experience with raising money. And so I was running the office in Vancouver and Stephen was down there. So we kind of tag teamed when it came to funding. I think for us, the thing that we came across quite often was people asking us if we were in a relationship. That was the number one thing. I remember we were going through an acquisition for a company that we were helping them get acquired. And it was a group of probably 14 lawyers on the other side for about a week, where we just sat and while they did all the due diligence. And I remember at the end of the due diligence period, one of the people came up to us and said, "Okay, we can't figure it out. Are you guys an item?" And I'm like, "I'm married. I got kids." They're like, "I know. Are you guys an item? Like, we're just trying to figure this out." And I'm like, "Is that what you've been focusing on all week? Are we secretly friends with benefits?" No, we're not. We're not founders with benefits. We are just friends. And so we would get that in the VC, you know, are you guys together? No. And so I was always careful to make sure that I wore my wedding ring. But you know, in today's society, people always just said, "Yeah, but are you guys together?" So that was an interesting thing, being part of a mixed foundership for sure. Yeah, we had that.
What an interesting statement that both you and Humaira said, that made sure you were wearing your wedding rings. I mean, that to me is, you know, crazy. I'm going to switch tax here just for a moment. And there was a question specifically, there's a couple of really good questions. Well, they're all great questions. And this one's for Emma. And she said, and the question is, how have you navigated being a Black woman entrepreneur working in the blockchain space? And what are some advice you would give to Black women trying to enter this space?
Okay, so I'll start backwards. If you want to do it, just do it. Just do it. Don't listen to anyone else. Just get in there and do it. What blockchain needs more now is more mass adoption, and so we welcome everybody. So yeah, never let anyone tell you don't do it. Just do it. Have a basic plan together though, and then just do it. I have to say, when I got into blockchain, I was very fortunate. And I know this is not, once again, I'll preface this by saying this is not the story for everybody, but when I got into blockchain, it literally was just me and the geeks. That was it. And they were like, "We have a nice business idea." And I'm like, "But how are you going to market it?" And they were like, "Isn't that what you do? Can you help us?" Because all they wanted to do was just, you know, build cool stuff and then just go back to building cool stuff. And they didn't want to leave their place. And they were like, "Emily, you can talk to people for us." So the guys that I worked with and the guys in the space in 2016, 2017, as long as, you know, you could help them or you really liked blockchain, they let you in. They didn't care who you were. whether you were green, white, black, or red, as long as you could help them. And you really liked the space, and they liked that I was like willing to learn. And you know, it's been very good for me. So like whenever I go anywhere in the world right now, guaranteed there's some people from Toronto there who recognize me. So I remember I went to Bermuda a couple of years ago, and I went to a reception, and I walked in, and I was like the only person there. I went by myself, and I walked in, there were like 8 guys from Toronto. They were like, Emma, and I'm like, oh, they're my guys. So I always call them my guys. But so I was very fortunate that way. Now, blockchain has changed. Now you kind of have to sort of say who you are and talk about your accreditations for people to take you seriously. But then what they're finding out is that I've probably been in the space longer than them, you know? So that's the respect. And, you know, sometimes I'm not going to kid you. Sometimes I have one of those days and I'm like, really, you're questioning me? I am here, you know? So you kind of have to take the good with the bad, but know that if you believe in yourself, and that's the most important thing, you kind of have to believe in yourself and what you're going to accomplish. It's not every day you're going to be like, okay, I'm the shit. You know, some days you're going to be like, why today? You know, but as long as you have that overarching belief that what you're doing is the right thing, or that, you know, you're here because you want to learn and do good things, you know, well, we welcome you.
That's an interesting, and I'm going a little bit off script here, but it comes back to the mentorship. It comes back to the role models, and it's something that each of you have said in different ways, but it's sort of just, you know, just do it. Where does the confidence come from? And I mean, obviously there's days where you don't feel confident, but how do you sort of overcome that? And Emma, do you want to take that one off first?
I forgot to tell you, there's one thing that is really important. You got to build a good tribe of people around you. So I am really fortunate. I'm not going to kid you, but I always tell people, if you want to up your game, look at who surrounds you and change them if you have to. So I'm really fortunate that the women I hang out with, good Lord, they are going places. They are like incredible. I look at them and I'm like, Forbes 25 under 25, you're doing this. Oh, you just had a conversation with President Obama. Okay. And I'm like, what? You know, and but what I've learned, and I remember seeing this in a TED Talk, and it's so incredibly true. That was a TED Talk that actually changed my life, along with another one. But it's, if you want to do extraordinary things, hang out with extraordinary people, because they make doing extraordinary things normal. And so because you're hanging out with them, you want to do the same things. And, you know, you can ask them, they're happy to share how they do things. And then you watch them and suddenly you're doing it too. So when I'm with my friends in blockchain and they're doing things, like, they're absolutely incredible. And we're just constantly talking about what we do. We have group chats, we, you know, chat on the WhatsApp, we get messages. Okay, so sidebar, my friend is in Barbados right now, and she messaged me and she was like, Emma, I went for a swim and there was this nice lady and I was talking to her while we were in the water, and it turned out she was a prime minister. And this was yesterday. I was like, okay, wow, okay. So, you know, like, I would always tell you, if you really want to up your game, change the people that you're with. Now, I'm not saying get rid of them, because I have friends from all over. I'm just saying maybe limit your interaction and interact more with people who you want to be with. And it's not just for in terms of work. If you want to change your mindset, if you want to be happier, hang out with happy people. Don't hang out with sad people. You know, life is depressing enough, and maybe only see them once a month instead of talking to them every day. Little things like that, things that can improve who you are. And if you look at, I like to set goals. So if you look at the goal that you want to achieve, go ahead and do it. So one person that I really look up to, and I talk about her a lot, my friend Amber, she's absolutely amazing. And I remember, end of 2017, I wanted to go to the United Nations, and I was like, all my friends are going to the United Nations, why can't I go, right? And so I said that to her, and she's like, Emma, I think with all the people that we know, you can get there. And I was like, this is not a normal conversation. Like, you don't just show up at the United Nations, right? And then I thought about it and I was like, she's right. Let me delve into my network and see what I can do. And so I set a goal and I asked 4 people and it didn't happen. And then literally the 5th person, he called me up and said, "Hey, Emma, I'm going to be speaking at the United Nations. Do you want to come and hear me speak?" And I'm like, "You're 23 years old." I'm like, "What are you speaking about?" And he's like, "I'm doing all these things." And he really was doing good work, but it was just jaw dropping. And then I went there and I realized that, something, we hold them on a pedestal, but if you just have drive and determination, you too can get there. And that was July 2017, no, 2018. By June 2019, I was there speaking at the UN and doing stuff in concert with them. So once again, it was my bubble, the people who I hang out with, right? And they make things achievable. Nothing just seems too high to achieve. So I would tell you, if you want to do good things, or just change your bubble, make it happen.
That's awesome. We're just getting close to the end. We have about 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to maybe just do a quick roundtable before I get to the closing remarks. So we have all of 1.5 minutes for these last few comments. But I am going to start with Anne, and recommendations, or 2 words of advice for women who are wanting to be entrepreneurs or are looking to grow their businesses, or just looking for some inspiration. What would you tell them?
Do it. I mean, I think that's the theme, and that's what we're all kind of saying. But yeah, that's really the only advice. I don't think that I think that we all have these mental blockers that are preventing us from developing ourselves to our true potential. So identify those and then just get rid of them. Just, move forward, find the way that's going to get you to grow into who you want to be. And that's going to propel you into doing things that you've never tried before. So just do it.
Do it, just like Mikey. Tanis?
I agree 100%. I think oftentimes we look at obstacles, myself included. I look at my obstacles as reasons why I can't do something, but ultimately you can actually turn them around and make them a reason why you can. So I have 2 boys. I go through the struggles so that they will be able to see a strong woman doing their stuff as well. So it's just taking all those obstacles and pushing, and definitely finding a mentor, finding somebody who is in your space, doing what you need, what you're doing, or at a stage in your business where you need to be, and find that mentor who can guide you and go do it.
Great. Humaira?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that too. Surround yourself with people. Reach out to I've reached out to some amazing people. I'd recently connected with Jillian Musig, co-founder of Moz, and she was open to a conversation. I was like, yeah. So, I'm always reaching out to people who I want to be like, or get inspired from them. So just reach out at least 10 times, and then you can move on to other people. But reach out to people who can help you. As well as just do it. And I think anytime we feel uncomfortable, and that's what I tell myself, which is every day, you feel uncomfortable, you're growing. So, and if you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're not going to have that growth. So yeah, absolutely. And there's ways to navigate a lot of challenges, maybe an uphill battle at times, but if I can do it, literally anyone can.
Emma, last 20 seconds to you.
I would just say do it. Don't let anyone stop you. If it was easy, everybody would do it, but know that it is rewarding, and don't let anyone stop you from achieving your potential.
Thank you. My notes here, my closing remark notes say, try and draw a thread from all of the comments today. And I think that absolutely it's just do it. And so the 4 of you have been amazing inspiration and role models. And I think that just your words of wisdom and your experiences have been truly insightful for everybody who's listening in on this presentation. So thank you all so much. It's I think I might go and get a tattoo after when I leave here.
Okay, I didn't expect that.
So thank you, Anne, Emma, Humaira, and Tanis. That was just great. I think that the theme in Suzanne's presentation on see it, be it is such a strong foundation and so important, and I guess a good reminder that we're role models all the time, and so I have to take that role seriously and really bring up the women that are in our lives and support them and really, you know, share the learnings that we've had with them going forward. So stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up in the next few weeks from the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub in BC. They're kicking off a Wikipedia edit-a-thon this weekend. So in the spirit of see it, be it, you're invited to nominate women who deserve a Wikipedia profile and or contribute a couple of hours of your time to writing an article for those who are nominated. So what a cool idea. So as of 2021, there is still a significant gender gap in Wikipedia, and we've collectively agreed that it's time to prioritize uplifting the voices of influential women and push back on the stereotypes of what leaders in STEM and entrepreneurship look like. So this is our chance to make it. So you can learn more and register. So they dropped a link into the chat box, so you can go there and find that. This session, not this session exactly, but one like it will be done in French on March the 12th. So there will be a whole new lineup of panelists and a moderator. So encourage anybody who would like to see it in French to tune in next week on the 12th. And next in the conferencing series is Financing Pathways, where the Knowledge Hub will look at Canada's funding ecosystem and highlight some of the innovative models that are changing the way capital gets into the hands of women entrepreneurs. And so certainly some experience around this table of innovative ways and interesting ways. So that takes place on March the 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And again, another link in the chat box. So that's it for today. I'm officially 1 minute over, and so appreciate, again, sincere thanks to our panel. You're amazing and wonderful, and I look forward to staying connected with all of you. Thank you to the Knowledge Hub for having all of us, and it's Friday afternoon, pretty close. I think it's Friday afternoon, not quite Friday afternoon in BC, but most of the other rest of the country. So have a wonderful weekend, and be well. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.